Hello, and welcome to another edition of WIF's Laptop Cinema Club, the series where we bring you exclusive access and intimate conversations with the female creatives making the media you love. I'm Ebony Adams, the manager of public programs for women in film, and I'm delighted to bring you a conversation today about The Challenge, the show in which reality stars party, fight, and hook up in exotic locales, all while competing in wild physical challenges and scheming to win cash prizes. Today's conversation is all about the magic and mayhem that goes into making the hugely popular and long-running competition show, The Challenge. But it's also part of our focus on the upcoming 2021 Emmys race, because we want to remind you there's some phenomenal work being done in the unscripted reality and competition genres, and there are women working behind the scenes that you should know. One of these women is executive producer of The Challenge, Emer Harkin. We'll learn more about her career, and The Challenge as she talks today to People Magazine's Breanne Heldman. Breanne, over to you.
I am so honored to be moderating this panel with Emer. She is amazing. She has been part of The Challenge, which we are talking about season 36. I know season 37 is currently in production. 37 seasons, guys, on MTV. It is a remarkable feat. And it really did lay the groundwork for reality competition series as we know them. The Challenge existed before Survivor, before Big Brother, before Amazing Race. Emer, you've been a part of it since 2008. Do you feel like The Challenge gets its due? Do those shows recognize that their DNA started with The Challenge?
You know, thank you so much for your lovely words. First of all, Breanne, you're so kind and it makes me kind of emotional. Thank you for being so kind. And to Ebony also. I think behind the scenes, I think the creatives, I think the producers, I think all the masterminds behind those shows, that I collaborate with, that I respect, they always tip their cap to The Challenge and to the work we do and let us know that, when they're gearing up for another season, they're always sure to check what The Challenge has done, what games they're doing, as a sort of a reference point, because as you say, we predated all of those shows. So it's really great to sort of be the grandfather and the backbone of this world of reality. And I think that I think from a professional standpoint, I think that everybody's very aware of The Challenge and everybody's very respectful of what we achieve. But in the sort of public domain, it's almost like, you're not on like a network like CBS, like Survivor or whatever, maybe that we're a little bit less in the public domain and that people perhaps forget about us because we've just always been there. But as you said, 37 seasons later, and to be garnering some of the highest ratings we ever have, we're in the most successful point of our franchise, and that's something that we're immensely proud of, and we're a force to be reckoned with in this world, and I love it. I'm a diehard fan, but why do you think, as someone who has actually watched all 36 and is counting the minutes for 37, why do you think fans are attracted to this show and keep coming back? What is it? What's the secret sauce? And then I want to talk about behind the scenes, because that's a totally different animal. Sure. Look, I think the secret sauce is a beautifully simple format that everybody bought into and loved from day one. So like enormous kudos to Buna Murray for developing this format with MTV. And I also think it's the casting. I think it's our amazing cast who are characters in our lives. We have seen them grow and evolve. We've seen them on other shows. We've seen different versions of themselves, much like ourselves as we've evolved and grown. They have in front of us. And I think that that's something that you very rarely see in this world. So it's this sort of perfect hybrid of soap. It's almost like docu-soap and reality that is just like merging together in our show. And we see people push to their limits. We've seen them around the world. They've taken us to places that we can't necessarily go to from our homes. And I think that there's just the right balance of reality and aspiration in that. And I think that the casting is crucial. Like I say, I just think we are indebted to have such a wonderful, very diverse cast who represent us, and they represent who we are, and they represent who we are globally. They represent who we are domestically, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think we could all probably identify
to somebody in one way or the other, and to see what they go through in these trials and tribulations, in this sort of out of body experience. It's like otherworldly on the challenge. We're invested. We've bought into all these people. We want to see them do well, and we want to see the struggle. And I think that's just compelling for any audience.
Absolutely. I think I'm about to make a comparison probably no one has ever made to the challenge. But, you know, Grey's Anatomy is about to go into its 18th season, which is remarkable. And what people love about that is watching Meredith's journey and her growing up and her evolving and her having children and her in this experience. And I do think that that is actually part of what makes the challenge so special. We see someone like CT who started out as this rough and tumble guy, and now he's this like dad bod father guy and being a mentor to Big T. And I think it's part of that drama that you get from scripted that you actually get from the challenge.
That's right. And I think you've totally nailed it with CT being such a wonderful example. You know, I've known CT for over a decade. So I've seen him going through all of the different iterations of what it, you know, to become the man he is today, and still is evolving. You know, watch this space. CT, you know, the CT dad, grandfather, that's not the end of CT. And watch this space, because you're going to consistently see the metamorphosis of the man, the myth, the legend. And that's just a perfect example. Everybody wants to know what CT's doing and what's going on. And he's been very gracious in giving his true story to our viewers. And it's something that he's passionate about and that we're passionate about telling. And I think that's the magic sauce.
Do you ever struggle finding the balance between showing that personality drama and the intense competition stuff?
Yeah, I mean, you do. You know, I often say that with every episode of the challenge, we potentially have 30 storylines that we could cover, from competition to the in-house drama. So we always have this complex, convoluted mismatch of what's going on, because we have so many people in this pressure cooker environment. And we can cover the competition, we can cover what's going on with them socially, and it's just about kind of getting that right balance. We don't have the bandwidth, even though we do up to 20 episodes, 90 minutes at a time, we still don't have the bandwidth to cover absolutely everything that goes on in the house. So the balance is really just about, you know, what the viewers want to see, and what's the most compelling story for our audience, and that's sort of our gauge in terms of trying to balance it out.
I think one of the things people don't realize about the challenge is they're used to seeing all of these same people coming back season after season, but the same thing happens behind the scenes. The people like you have been there since 2008. Justin Booth has been there a long time. Danny has been there a very, very long time. People come back. The producers, the behind the scenes people, they keep coming back season after season after season. And I will just add that I was blessed enough to get to visit the set in Thailand of War of the Worlds 2. And the family feeling is it's not lip service. I was there for 6 days. You couldn't fake it. It was raining. It was not great weather. And everyone is so supportive and so passionate about the work they're doing. So I just want to make sure that, you know, would love to have you talk a little bit about why behind the scenes keeps coming back too, and what that's like.
Oh, look, thank you. It's possibly what I'm most proud of about our show. Between cast and crew, we know each other so well. We've all done it for so many years. We spend holidays together that we don't with our families. We've spent Thanksgivings together. We spend birthdays. We spend all of these landmark occasions. And it's really bound us together in a way that is very unusual. And the other thing that's of note about the challenge is that it's a real global family. As you can tell from my accent, I'm Irish. The challenge picked me up in Queenstown, New Zealand, when they were filming Duel 2 there in 2008. And I was backpacking. I had a background. I was working in radio. I had no intention of getting into reality television. I had never heard of the challenge. I was like, absolutely not. And here I am, because you mentioned Justin Booth, who has showrun the challenge for many years. And Justin hired me and then subsequently brought me to all of the locations around the world since. And his method, which was, you know, ingenious back in the day, was that we would procure the best, most skilled production staff in all of the locations that we shoot in. So you'll see that in our crew, we've got South Africans, Panamanians, Namibian crew, Irish, Kiwi, Australian, you know, we have met from Mexico, from Canada, there's Argentina, there's crew from all around the globe. And it, because, you know, it's almost like when you get the call, it's like another badge of honor, you earning another stripe, and everybody is just so delighted to do it and you know, keep doing whatever we can to keep this family and the show alive. And it's something that's beautiful to see all the different nationalities, all the different accents, all the different, you know, everybody in like different colors, shapes, sizes. It's pretty amazing, actually. And I'm so glad that you mentioned it, because not a lot of people know that about our show.
It is. It's really remarkable. And I know that you had a kid and now have been bringing your child to the set. Can you talk about what that's like?
No judgment for all of the moms out there.
No, I think it's really amazing. And, you know, I think a lot of people would be surprised to learn not only that a woman is running the challenge and executive producing the challenge, but also a mom who's got her kid on set. Yeah,
that's right. And look, this world is actually quite a male-dominated world inherently. We are a very stunt-heavy show. It's a physically grueling show that requires enormous builds. There really is just such an astronomical amount of work that goes into creating this show. And traditionally, it's largely been led by men. And men have sort of headed up departments within the show as well, just by the nature of the industry, really. And it's something that really has evolved in recent years, and now culminating in me show running and being able, you know, to be respected and to be collaborating in a field with some of the best in the world. Our stunt team, I've mentioned in the past, and, you know, when I asked, our stunt team do, you know, they're Hollywood blockbuster standard stunt people who are behind Suicide Squad, they're behind the Mad Max franchise. And so to be working toe to toe with professionals of that caliber in this space and to be respected and heard is something that I'm eternally grateful for. And it's not something that's forced or contrived. It's a really, really lovely collaborative environment. And as a female, as I said, I'm truly indebted I'm indebted for, you know, to be able to have the privilege of that experience. And yeah, I had a baby a couple of years ago, and I was show running the challenge before he was a year old, and he came along with us, and he is like an honorary crew member. He makes a visit to the elimination set once a season to get his picture taken, and he's an honorary stunt guy, and it was, you know, it wasn't really a decision, because my career and my job and this show is really part of the fabric of my life, that, you know, it wasn't a decision to bring him. It was always going to happen. And I, fortunately, I'm very lucky to have the support of Breanne Murray Productions and MTV in enabling me to do that. And it's been pretty great to navigate. He's certainly a jet setter. And he's been on more planes than I was in probably the first 30 years of my life. But, you know, it's great and it's fun, and how wonderful for him to have this global experience, you know, of pictures and videos and memories of a lifetime. So I'm pregnant now, actually, as, you know, we're going forward prepping further seasons, and I've no signs of stopping.
I love that.
We'll just jump on the bandwagon as well.
So I want to talk about filming Double Agents in Iceland in the middle of the pandemic. You guys were one of the first international productions to start filming. And as you said, you have such an international staff that you're bringing people, you had to bring people from 25 different countries into Iceland. Can you talk a little bit about the logistics of making that season even happen?
Yeah, look, it was absolutely terrifyingly daunting, Breanne. There was no framework in place for how to execute a show post-COVID, mid-COVID, and we just didn't have the blueprint of how we were going to execute this. So we just started from scratch. It was, you know, very, very detailed collaboration between Breanne Murray and MTV. And what we did and what we do every season is that I open a map and I think about the themes that we want to deliver for the forthcoming season and what countries are befitting of that theme. And so based on the theme that we were already committed to of double agents, I just looked at the map and sort of started thinking, okay, well, where could we safely go? Where could we get people in? Where is this even remotely viable? And from all ends, Iceland just seemed like the kind of golden unicorn that had managed the situation very well. They had very robust controls in terms of allowing internationals into the country. It was an arduous process to even get permitted to go to Iceland, to actually have the production greenlit, to have a sort of collaborative partnership with the Icelandic Film Commission in terms of bringing, facilitating all of us coming in, because you can imagine for them, it's extremely daunting when you say, okay, well, we're going to have a crew and cast of up to 200 across 25 nationalities. There's going to be people coming and going and coming and going, and you're going to help facilitate this and enable this. It took a lot of buy-in from them as well, from them also. But I think when they saw our product and dissected what the challenge was and what a wonderful showcase it is for any country, they really saw the benefit of that, and they fortunately trusted in me and let it happen. And so the rationale for going to Iceland was largely about how they had handled the situation and how controlled it was there. But in terms of getting people, it was very, very difficult because countries were shutting down, conditions were changing day to day, airlines were cancelling flights, we were diverting people through 3 and 4 and 5 airports. And then that becomes a thing, because if you have somebody from South America trying to get to Iceland through Amsterdam, but Amsterdam shuts down, and you send them to Paris, but Paris shuts down, and then it was a tremendous feat on the part of our travel coordinators, and we got everybody there safely and COVID free, and filmed for almost, we were there for over 4 months and got it done. So I still I'm still baffled at how we did it, but we worked really, really hard, and it was a very strict environment, but look, the payoff is wonderful, and I'm tremendously proud that we all achieved it. So it's certainly a season to remember.
Yeah, it's really amazing. How often did people have to get tested?
We were testing 3 times a week for all crew, and the cast were a little bit more frequently than that in the initial weeks. So we had an overall production bubble, and then we had pods within the bubble. But the way that we had to handle it, robust testing, like you say, which meant that we knew where everybody was at all times. So we knew that if we kind of got beyond like the first couple of weeks, and we retained that bubble, that we probably, the likelihood of penetration of the bubble was probably quite low. But it was just, you can imagine, I can't go to that room because you've been in there. So at no given time can those 2 people be there, and so on. It was a real jigsaw that was difficult to control. But, again,
after all of that, you still got to film in Iceland, which is just so spectacularly beautiful. And I feel like you guys really were able to take advantage of the terrain, potentially in a way that you wouldn't have been able to under normal circumstances because of tourism or whatever. Can you talk a little bit about getting to use some of those locations?
Yeah, absolutely. Iceland is arguably the most beautiful place that we've ever filmed. There's no diversity in one island. Like, I believe that, Australia, you've got Australia and you've got New Zealand, but in terms of like the geological spectacular grandeur of Iceland, it's so inspirational. Everybody touches down and is just totally blown away by everything they're seeing. And there were very few people there at the time that we were filming, and very few tourists could enter. So I was kind of chancing my arm and asking for places that traditionally would be absolutely off limits. I mean, we were inside volcanoes. It's one of the top tourist attractions in Iceland. We closed it down for 2 days. We were filming on glaciers, in ice caves that we would never have been able to get exclusive access to. And so it was just a really unparalleled moment in time that really benefited the show. And we're so delighted. You saw lava caves. We shut down, these spectacular waterfalls for days of filming, and it had no impact on local tourism or anything in regard to the local economy, because nobody was there anyway. So it sort of served everybody and was pretty perfect. So very grateful to Iceland for all they did in collaboration with us.
I want to talk a little bit about the final, because this final was unique, not only because it was a pandemic and you were in Iceland, but it was in the middle of a hurricane. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And I think at the time they hadn't gotten the tail end of a hurricane in maybe 20 years. So of course it hit the day of the final. And so as a producer, I sort of had the decision to make whether we push, can we do it? Like, you know, consistently getting insight from local meteorologists in terms of what we could do, what weather was approaching, advice from our safety consultants. And we did it. We went for it and we just embraced it. And the elements were, you know, somewhat forgiving. It was brutal for the cast because you can see that when we started the final, it was the most eerily calm, beautiful morning. The sun was rising over the mountains and over the glacier. And it was bitter cold, but beautiful, the most gorgeous light. And within an hour, by the time they got to their first checkpoint and they were, you know, playing this first challenge, it was like a windstorm. You know, TJ was like, you know, TJ Lavin couldn't stand up straight. The cast were shielding their eyes. It was like we were in a tornado, and they sucked it up and they, you know, they kept their heads up and they got through it, and we all did. I mean, coming off that mountain on day 2 was hilarious. We were all dry, like everything, like just soaked to the core, very little sleep, 2 days of pretty much round the clock work, and everybody was smiling. We had a really beautiful moment when all of the cast and crew came down, and we all had these burning torches around the finish line, and we all just had like a big round of applause and a cheer, and we sang and we cried and we laughed, and it was pretty beautiful.
That's remarkable. How much did you have to change on the fly because of the weather?
A lot. We had to lose checkpoints. We had this water portion that was in this world famous glacier lagoon in Iceland, where the water is like, it's just glass. It's like a mirror. It reflects the glaciers and the mountains in the background. You've got dozens of icebergs floating through the lake, and the cast were going to, you know, go through, and just cinematically, it would have been amazing. The icebergs were blown away. It was tidal water. There was it was not my vision. However, I always have to tell myself the audience isn't expecting to see what I was planning. So embrace it. It's real, it's raw, and look, it worked, you know. And I think that you just have to go with it and not take yourself too seriously in those situations, because what are you going to do? I mean, I'll do what I can to control any environment, but I will draw the line at the weather. I can do nothing about it. And we just went for it. And we've never filmed in those conditions before. So, you know, that was a first for us as well, you know, to do a final in that sort of climate. So it was fun. It was, again, another super memorable portion of the show.
I feel like you can say it was fun now, but maybe it was not so fun in the moment.
I mean, I got out for like 2 days. Like, it was just, it was a lot, but worth it.
What do you have to do, you know, when you're in that moment? You know, you're responsible for 200 people and their safety. I mean, do you feel that pressure? And, you know, what do you do to kind of make sure that you're keeping that top of mind?
Yeah, big time. It's the number one decision I make with everything I do. And like I said, you know, we were constantly checking with our safety consultants, with local meteorologists. Is it safe to film? Is it safe to be outside? At what point do we need to shut down? You know, we had people testing the wind at every checkpoint that we went to make sure that we weren't exceeding any particular force. On the second day, because the visibility was so compromised, we had to cut the final leg by about 30%, which is a creative concession that I hate to make, but I would do it in a second to ensure the safety of our cast and crew. So that was a decision that I made on the fly. So it was a matter of like, it was quite funny. the crew were almost racing the cast up the mountain, trying to bring the course down as the cast are like tearing it up for $1 million. So what you didn't see in that moment was that as CT and Amber were getting to the top, the art department were actually racing down with producers and camera operators with like final flags and TJ Lavin and repositioning everybody to a point that was safe and still looked super cool to have our finish. It would have been a very different visual. It would have been a very different visual ending. But look, again, we embraced it. We did it, and I think it still looks pretty good.
It looked fantastic. It was very celebratory. I do want to talk about TJ for a minute because he's such a quintessential element of this show. He's been doing it for over 25 seasons.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's amazing. And he's certainly grown with it. And I think, you can talk about this.
Yeah, we're so grateful for TJ Lavin and who he is, who he fundamentally is, who he is to our show. He is just the most kind, generous, professional moderator that we could ask for. He's the consummate professional. There are no airs and graces with TJ. He is my friend. He is such a wonderful collaborator and such a partner to work with on this show. TJ and I discuss scripts together, and we riff and we talk about how he wants to deliver it and how it could be better, how it could be funnier. And he comes down on the kids when he has to. He's totally okay with being the moderator on our show and really being the voice of reason. And for somebody who has achieved so much, I think he's very much somebody that the cast look up to. They respect him. They know he doesn't take sides. They know that he is very much about a fair game, fairness and respect and dignity and just a safe experience for everybody. And I think that he embodies that both in his personal life and on the show. And I think that that's why he's so awesome as our host. And like I say, I'm just so grateful to have him because he's as every bit as wonderful off camera as he is on camera. And we couldn't ask for a better host. So
yeah, I mean, there are so many great stories. This show is so international, constantly in different countries. And I know that TJ always makes an effort to kind of get involved in the communities where they are. I've heard stories about him buying groceries for strangers and in every country.
Every single thing. TJ will leave his entire wardrobe with the locals that he has. We buy TJ wardrobe at the start of the season. He gives it away to all the locals. He meets them for coffee. He befriends people everywhere he goes. He's been a little bit limited with COVID, which really bums him out because he really loves to get ingratiated into the local community. But yeah, like if it's somebody needing a ride on the side of the street, TJ will pick them up. If someone needs groceries or somebody needs a helping hand with something, TJ's there for it. Like he's a pretty exceptional human being, both in Vegas on our set and everywhere he travels. And it's, he really deserves the kudos for being who he is. Because he's a really, really special, wonderful guy, and just could not be happier to have him as part of our franchise.
It's amazing. Now, I know season 37's in the works. I'm sure there will be a 38, 39, 40. How do you keep upping the ante? How do you keep pushing that envelope season after season?
Oh, look, it's hard. And it's something that I really take so seriously because of our fan base, our loyal fans, our amazing cast and our crew. I want to deliver something that everybody's excited about and that everybody is inspired by and that people are passionate about and people are surprised about. And so what I generally do, as I mentioned, I'll open the world map, see where we haven't been, see what we would like to see more or less of, COVID permitting. That's sort of my main hurdle whenever I'm trying to figure out locations at the moment. But it's really just like, what themes, what are we inspired by in our world? What's going on in our world? What do we want to talk more or less about? What's interesting? What are hot topics in our society? Truth, fact, fiction, and disseminating truth from fiction, enemy from friendships, like all of those sort of themes were really interesting to me in Double Agents. And I think we'll just continue to sort of do that. Like, what are our cast inspired by? What were the themes of the previous season? What what really kicked off, because things will always happen organically in a way that we can't entirely predict for. And so it's interesting for me to look back on the prior season and say, it's really weird that that happened. We could have done more of this, or we should do more of that. And that's where the kind of twists and turns come about in our format, by just sort of taking a reflective look back and then trying to position ourselves forward and just, I guess, develop something that isn't too much of a departure from what our fans know and love, but it's just different enough that you see somebody in a different light, in a different way, in a different location, with some unexpected moments that make you go, we haven't seen that before, or we haven't seen, them have to make that decision, previously. So it's kind of taking the tried and trusted formula and just trying to softly modernize it, and that's sort of the intention. So we'll see. I mean, 37 down, 37 more, no problem.
Amazing. On that note, Emer, thank you so much for taking the time. This is a treat and a half.
I really am so delighted to talk to you guys. Thank you for making the time to talk to me and for asking me to be a part of this panel. I'm thrilled. And yeah, thanks for your consideration, everybody. It's great to connect.